What's up? I'm Dan Fredenberg, and this is another Chance Encounter. Hey, what's up? I'm Dan Fredenberg. I'm a commercial real estate guy. I'm from the internet. We're seeing more properties like this being built in front of a house. It's going to be torn down soon. I understand that there are power lines that are just kind of close. What's up again? This is Dan Fredenberg, and that there is a commercial real estate building. I'm joined today with Janice Greenley. How are you doing today, Janice?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
I'm fantastic. A little bit tongue-tied, but what can you do? But the important thing, I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but today we are joined by my very favorite member of the audience. And why is my favorite audience member here today? Well, obviously it's because this is a Chance Encounter where I interview commercial real estate players. That means deal sponsors, passive investors, buyers, sellers, all that kind of stuff. And you might ask yourself, why do you do that? And the answer is, if you've ever heard of private off-market deals that you're not supposed to publicly discuss, sometimes they're called 506B deals, then you should probably know that the SEC requires that you have documentation of your prior substantive relationship, or else they'll get ants in their pants and they might take away your business in the form of rescission. That's bad. So I have people on here to talk about their core competencies, their buy box and all that kind of fun stuff. And the benefit to you is you'll know exactly how my guest fits into these deals, as well as how to express yourself more effectively on the subject of commercial real estate deals. But before we get too much into the specifics, Janice, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit for the audience?
Sure. As he said, I'm Janice Greenley. I am a real estate investor. I focus on multifamily and storage assets. I've been doing this just for a brief time, just a short couple of years. Still a newbie in this big world. Have a recruiting background, and I'm in Texas, 3 kids, 2 grandbabies.
All right, excellent, excellent. That's great stuff. And of course, I'm starting off on the beginning of the. Oh, actually, if I hit that and then I do that, then I'll go to the first one. So the first segment that I always do here is I go through the 5 distinct motivations. Before I do that, I say, but wait, check your 8. Janice, I don't know what your technical acumen is, but can you try to look through the camera and down into the user's device down there? There might be this big hideous subscribe button down there, and they really ought to do something about. Okay, it's a ridiculous joke, but if you don't ask, nobody will do it. So that's why I do it. Anyway, the 5 distinct motivations. Everybody in this industry has their own unique why, their own motivation for why they're involved in these different deals. But I find that they fit pretty neatly into these 5 different categories. But the reason why we need to know what those motivations are as investors, potential partners, all that sort of stuff, is because when the going gets tough, it's sometimes tempting to throw in the towel. So it's important to know where's that motivation actually come from, so you can have that tough conversation. The first motivation of which is, if I hit this button over here, not the one I just did, it's preservation of purchasing power. What on earth is that? So if you're a retiree, independently wealthy, or if you're a physician, engineer, attorney, something like that, who makes more than you end up spend, you have a certain amount allocated to investment every month, then the name of the game is going to be about preservation of purchasing power. In other words, you're trying to make sure that your nest egg doesn't get deteriorated in the form of inflation or something like that. Now, the other thing that's special about people who are in this situation is they don't need to pull the trigger every 10 seconds. They don't have to do deals for deals' sake. They're going to either make their acquisition because inflation is eating away from the purchasing power of their cash flow, or if they can buy at a very steep discount. Of course, everybody should try to negotiate the biggest discount they possibly can, but the emphasis here is that people in this situation, they're not going to get involved unless it's actually a great deal for them. Now, full confession here, I'm not to this point in my real estate journey yet. What describes me a whole lot better is trading time directly for wealth. I've got a background in IT, specifically the CRM and funnel building space. I've been a full stack developer for quite some time, and I started doing that for real estate players starting in 2014, going off and beginning to do it on my own starting around 2019, 2020. And the reason why I made the switch from pure tech into trying to get into these real estate deals is because I noticed that if you are pursuing bigger salaries, higher compensation of that form, your tax burden is going to get bigger and bigger along with that. So it hit me that I should probably pivot and figure out a way to be compensated in the form of deployed capital, aka equity. And so that's why I'm involved into these real estate deals. But of course, I get that that's a little subtle for some people, especially youngsters. They have a little bit of difficulty getting their head around that one. More often than not, people who are young or a little bit later in their journey, they are interested in fast tracking retirement, or maybe it's just controlling their schedule. But of course, when you're looking for that time freedom, that sort of thing, I think the only issue with that is that some people think that that's secretly everybody's motivation, is that they don't want to work anymore. They want to just live life on their own terms. And quite frankly, that's just not the case. Some people, they are going to keep on hustling into their 90s, especially those who are fueled more by ambition. They want to buy their entire hometown. They want that generational wealth to make sure their great-grandchildren never have to hold a day job. And that's why they're making these acquisitions. Now, of course, I get that some people vilify that sort of mentality or that level of ambition, but it's important to realize that somebody needs to be motivated to stick with it because these commercial properties, they need to be in great shape, and they need to be run well, or else nobody's going to want to rent them or stay in them. So it really does benefit everybody involved, especially the GP team, to have people who are fueled by that level of ambition. Now, of course, the other group that's going to hustle into their 90s is not necessarily for their own ambitions, but maybe they've found a sector of society, or maybe it's animals, maybe it's the environment, who knows what it is, but they decided they want to make a big impact, and they found out that, hey, there's a big financial component to making a difference, and that's why they're making their commercial real estate acquisitions. So Janice, of those 5 different motivations, what combination of them would you say describes you best?
Definitely a combination of them, for sure. I was, my husband and I both high income earners, so we were looking for tax benefits. 2, I did want to leave my corporate career and do something different. It was time for a new challenge, and I wanted to be able to build wealth, not just trade my time for dollars long term. I do want to make enough money where there are some philanthropic things that I can do with it, as well, some big dollars. And as far as the generational wealth, I'm more concerned with not the wealth itself, but understanding and teaching my kids and my grandchildren how to go about other options besides our traditional model of go to school, get a job, work till you're 90. There are lots of options out there, and I don't want to vilify any of them. Different things are good for different people, and that's fine. But I want my family to know that they have choices. Go figure it out, and here's one option. And I don't care if it comes with the money for them, but I do want them to have the skills.
I love that answer. And the thing I like the most about that answer is that it's really well grounded. When we're talking about motivations, it's really easy to seem starry-eyed and, even to the point of being naive. But the fact is, every business has risks involved. Real estate is no separate. And this next slide, this next segment, the tolerance for risk assessment, the spot that it came from is if you've ever been involved in one of these off-market deals, the ones you're not allowed to publicly discuss, the 506B deals, then the securities attorney in the mix should have forced everybody to fill out this super invasive financial questionnaire, sometimes called a suitability questionnaire. And when I was filling one out, I found that that one question in particular, I found that it lacked utility. Sure, it made sense to ask about your net worth, your investment history, all that sort of stuff. But the question for tolerance for risk is, do you like lots and lots of risk, or do you want a little bit sprinkled on top, like on a cupcake or something like that? It seemed a little bit ridiculous to me because I felt that it didn't matter which of the multiple choices you chose. It didn't really give me an idea of your actual perception of risk. So for this interview, I made my own question, which is a fill in the blanks question. It is, there are many popular investment asset classes, but I think blank is too risky. So Janice, it can be inside real estate, it can be outside real estate. You can give me one of each if you want, but what's too risky for you to invest in?
Crypto.
Crypto.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't understand it enough, but part of it, I don't feel like it's something like real estate is a tangible asset. There's income, there's expenses, there's things that you can document to show the value, the cash flow, all of that. It doesn't mean that there's no risk, but you can control to certain degrees some of the risk. I don't know that I feel that that's really available in crypto. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'm happy to be proved wrong if that's the case, but that's just the way I feel about it.
Yeah, well, it's okay because I'm a tech guy, and I'm also on your side with that one when it comes to crypto. Because the thing that bugs me about it the most is that it's an appreciation move. You buy low, sell high, or else you lose. And
That's right.
and it's not like a roof over your head where it's something that you need regardless of market cycles or all that sort of stuff. And also it doesn't pay you to own it. It's not like owning an apartment complex, where the point is to get that cash flow in return for your investment. So I'm definitely on board with that answer. But that brings me to the next section, which is the favorite deal metrics. Now, I originally thought that this question was a little bit too fastball because I knew that I'd be running into a lot of marketing people, front of house, public relations, that sort of thing. And I was concerned that, like, okay, well, is it actually fair to be asking, what do you want to call it, spreadsheet jockeys questions to people who are front of house, and so that's a little bit tough. But it hit me after about 100 episodes or so of these chance encounters that it makes sense to include it anyway, because we're all curators of deals. We have to be able to compare them somehow. So you have to know like at least like a half dozen or so metrics. So I don't think that's too much of a pushy thing to do, is to ask which ones you tend to rely on. And for anybody in the audience who's only listening and not watching, I read these out for everybody. I've got 14 of them. It's not an exhaustive list, so you're welcome to add any more. But the list is cash on cash, IRR, which is internal rate of return, which is also frequently called an equity multiple. There's the cost per door. There's the net operating income of the business. There's the going in cap rate, which is really talking about what's the difference between the cap rate you're paying versus the going rate for commercial properties in that area, because that's something that's published. And so you get a quick idea of how much of a discount you're getting just from that back of the envelope calculation. Then there's the loan interest rate, which is especially important if you're assuming a loan. There's the occupancy rate, which is the inverse of vacancy rate. So don't get confused with those two words. They're just the inverse. The next one is the average income where the property is located, to give an idea of the spending power of residents, potential residents. There's the amortization period of the loan, also especially important if you're going to be assuming the loan. There's the difference between the market versus in-place rents, to give an idea of if you improve the property, is there really upside in the form of higher rents? Is that actually feasible? Then there's the population growth where the property is located. That's to give an idea of, is there baked in appreciation from the form of demand? Because if there's more people moving there, then more people need a place to stay. Then there's the sponsor record, which is how many deals have gone full cycle, how many deals are on the go right now. There's the waterfall split or exit strategy, which is talking about what happens to your investment after your principal has been returned. So are they planning to just do a cash out refinance? Are you going to be separated from the deal? Are you going to get returns after your capital has been returned? What exactly is going to happen? And then the last one I have is DSCR, which is debt service coverage ratio, which is how much of the revenue is going out the door immediately just to pay for the loan. So once again, that's not an exhaustive exhaustive list, but Janice, do you want to give a top three, or what exactly do you tend to focus on when it comes to these metrics?
Yeah, so I would say the thing that I personally look at, a couple of things. One, that definitely the debt service coverage, because if you're buying wrong and you can't make the payments, if rents dip for any reason, things like that, we want to have good buffer there. I want good cash on cash or cash flow. Again, because if there's no cash flow, then what are we doing this for? Got to have money to pay the bills. And net operating income, where is your income versus expenses, and what does that look like? Because if none of those three things are good, none of the rest really matters, honestly, in my opinion. And I would say maybe there's somebody that's 20 years in real estate that says, oh my gosh, she doesn't know. To me, those are critical, because those are all the things that make sure that we are paying the bills, paying investors. I don't want capital calls, things like that. If I look at a deal and occupancy is low, well, maybe there's a property management issue, or maybe there's a reason and we can fix that. Cost per door compared to what? You know what I mean? And Texas is a non-disclosure state, so we don't know what our neighbors paid. So there's too many variables. Maybe it's Class A and you're looking at Class B. So I'm looking at the money. I don't care what the cap rate is. What's the money showing me?
I love that answer, and that's why I'm just gobbling it up like a delicious subscribe sandwich. Is that intense enough for you?
Sure, absolutely.
Exactly. That's my little indicator. It's time to pull out the Dan Does Deals Commercial Core Competency Cube with the 6 core roles inside a commercial real estate deal. And I go through all 6 sides in every episode, and it really is the linchpin that I use to help people understand how my guests fit into these deals. And as I'm going through these 6 different sides, if you're sitting there thinking, wow, I really need to get me one of those, well, the good news is it's absolutely free. You go to dandoesdeals.com. There's this big, really obvious looking, conspicuous looking button that says download your cube here. And that goes straight to the PDF without even asking for your email address. Yes, you heard me right. I'm committing the cardinal sin of marketing, which is you should never, ever, ever give away your freebie without asking for some sort of contact information. But I just like you, and I want to just make sure that it's easy for you to get that. So make sure you head to the site, and then you can download this and print it out. But here we go. The first role I want to talk about is the repositioner role. They look at a bunch of different properties, and they do a bunch of paperwork. They need to underwrite the deal, in other words, do the math to figure out, is this property actually even making the amount of money that the broker / seller is claiming it is, because the repositioner also needs to find more upside. So they need to figure out how can they change how the property is run so that it's making more money. And if I were to put my finger on the most peculiar part about repositioners, I'd have to say it's like, why do they need such a vast circle of financiers? Financiers are not operators. They are not involved in any sort of day-to-day operations. They only deal with money, paperwork, and the owners. Okay, so we're talking banks, lenders, investors, that sort of thing. They're all under the label of financiers. So real estate is such a capital intensive business that you do have to know all sorts of different financiers. And the main reason is because if you can find cheaper money, that goes straight to the profitability of the business. So that's why all of the repositioners are eager to meet more financiers. Basically, just about any role is looking for financier relations as well. But the next place where the repositioner is going to look is going to be at the operations to say, how can we stop those Benjamins from going down the toilet? But of course, there's more to operations than just unclogging toilets and collecting rents and all that kind of stuff. Me personally, I tend to get onto GP teams on larger deals that tend to have their own third-party management involved. So we're talking 100 units or more. And then my involvement has to do with my tech stack skills for any sort of automation and asset management skills based off of me being a handy guy and an engineering background. But the bigger one is that the GP team needs somebody with some serious marketing chops, because even if you are outsourcing to a third-party property management, What if they can't fill the units? Vacancy is the deal killer, so somebody has to have some serious marketing chops so they can step in if those units aren't filled and start getting those rents coming in from that. But there's only so much optimization you can do with operations. So the next thing that the repositioner is going to consider is getting a contractor team involved to renovate the place. If the place is nicer in the future, then chances are future residents will be more than happy to pay more in rent than the current ones. So it makes sense to make the place nicer, put in that investment, and raise those rents. But if only things were that easy, you can spend endless amounts of money on your property and it won't necessarily turn into a return on investment. Take if you gold plate the toilets, for example. Not a really great idea. But of course, there's more to it than even that, because maybe they're going to cut corners, maybe they're going to use subpar materials, maybe they'll drag their heels as they're doing all of these improvements. And if you're like me, see, I don't know if you know this about me or not, but I'm from the internet. So that means I need locals. I need boots on the ground, somebody who can be there in an hour or two, because one of the things you can be certain of is that's not going to be me. I'd still be stuck at an airport in an hour or two. So I definitely need those boots on the ground who can come on a moment's notice. They can check to make sure that the contractors are keeping on schedule and doing the work that they ought to, making sure that the third-party property managers are actually doing what they say, they're not sloughing photos or misrepresenting the actual state of things and that sort of stuff. But to explain what the sixth role is on the cube, I like to do a little bit of a hypothetical. Let's say you are a physician or an engineer or an attorney or something like that. Maybe you already own a few rentals. Maybe you have an Airbnb or two or something like that. So you get this idea in your head saying, hey, I know how this works. I get my down payment and I borrow the rest. Now, if you are looking down the street and you see there's a 350 unit apartment complex that's kind of catching your eye, you might think to yourself, hey, if I turn around to my colleagues, I say, hey, let's all throw in 100K each or something like that, I think we could take that over. So you show up to the financiers, to the banks, full of confidence saying, hey, I want to buy that building over there for tens of millions of dollars. You don't happen to have, say, tens of millions of dollars that you want to lend us, do you? Well, you're in for a little bit of a surprise. And if you are in a coaching program or something like that, I encourage you to listen very carefully to this next part, because I find a lot of coaching programs skip over this. The bank is going to ask you, who's your sponsor? Who's the KP? What's that all about? See, the lenders are in the business of taking depositor money and then lending it out to people who will actually pay it back. So that means they need to have some assurance that you're not just going to take all those funds, run the place into the ground and leave everybody, a lot poorer. So they're going to insist, if you want to be eligible for a commercial real estate loan, somebody in the fold has to already own a similar asset. So in other words, somebody has to own a 350 unit apartment complex if you're going to be going and borrowing money to buy a 350 unit apartment complex. On top of that, you're going to need enough collateral, in other words, a balance sheet of at least the amount of the loan, and you're going to need some liquidity to prove you can actually run the property. But if you've got all those pieces, you got yourself a commercial real estate deal. So Janice, I'm confident that you are doing some sort of repositioning as far as curating and finding better deals. And of course, you're going to be doing the financier relations, because everybody has to be involved with investors and that sort of thing. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. Which roles do you anticipate taking up in your next deal?
So definitely boots on the ground. We find things here. I'm in Texas. Texas is a hot market, and a lot of people need somebody boots on the ground. And so we definitely take on that role. Repositioning for sure. We just did due diligence on a purchase. So that's part of it as well. And capital raising, which wasn't necessarily discussed in that, but it's part of it as well. So
right. Right, exactly. The financier relations. I'm speaking a little bit of code, right?
That's right. So a little bit of all of it, as well as some of the asset management. So some of the operations. Frankly, I want my hands in a little bit of all of it, because the more I understand all the pieces, the better that makes me as an owner.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. So let's get on to the buy box. You already said a little bit about that, but just so you know, when a real estate person asks you, hey, what you looking for? What's your ideal property? What's your buy box? We're really asking about three main things. Janice already hit the first one, which is location. Which state? Which county? Possibly even which neighborhood. It's definitely going to matter before you call it ideal. So that location is the first one. The second one is size. Now, if you're talking about multifamily, in other words, apartment complexes, the way they rank the size is with unit count, the number of apartment units. And the reason why it's relevant is because the type of team that is focusing on 5 or 15 unit apartment complexes, they're going to be fundamentally different from the ones that are taking over 150, 250 unit apartment complexes. So that's why it matters. Now, of course, there are other forms of commercial real estate that go off of square footage, like warehousing and things like that, but the size still applies. Now, the third element that we're asking for in a buy box is called class. I personally prefer the term desirability because there's more than one part of it. There's the condition, and then there's the location. When you're talking about the condition, we're talking about how old is the facility, how beat up is the facility, what sort of luxuries and amenities do they have, like is there a swimming pool, hot tub, laundry facilities, that sort of thing, depending on the property. And that's going to be deciding the condition. Whereas the location itself, everybody knows that old broker trope of location, location, location. I prefer to say traffic, 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 because if a gazillion people are passing by that property every day, it's automatically going to have some built-in desirability on that account alone. Of course, the crime rate is always going to matter, but since we are generally talking about residential real estate, in other words, multifamily, the school districts are the other part that are going to be quite relevant to the desirability of the building. But both the location and the condition of the property are both rated the same way as in grade school, where you have A plus at the top and then A and then A minus, then B plus and so on. So Janice, as far as your organization goes, where's the sweet spot?
75 to 150 units is great. As I mentioned, Texas, but not all of Texas. We don't look along the coast because we don't like hurricanes. And we are particular about even neighborhoods. We like B, C plus assets. What's really great is if you can get a C that looks like a B in a B neighborhood. I mean, that's the sweet spot right there.
I love it. I love it. So let's talk about people. It's my favorite part about real estate, and I think it's because it's a multifaceted industry. Nobody is really going to be all 6 roles on the cube for any meaningful amount of time. They're going to pick 1 or 2 or whatever and really focus on that piece of the puzzle. Me coming from tech, it's a lot of people tend to be a little bit antisocial, but the thing about real estate is because of these extra roles, people are really eager to make referrals, build new teams, even if they're not going to be involved personally. It's just the bigger your network is, and the more buildings that you cumulatively control, the better your future is going to be. Now, of course, I mentioned before already that real estate is a highly capital intensive industry, so that means everybody is going to be interested in meeting more financiers like investors and that sort of thing to help them deploy capital. So I'm no different as far as that goes. I'm interested in meeting people for that. But in general, the sponsors and KPs are the people that I'm most eager to speak to, just because my skill set requires that I work with somebody who already has a business built up. When you're first starting up a real estate business, you need people who are putting in 80 hours a week and juggling lots of balls, wearing lots of hats and stuff like that. I'm not afraid of wearing multiple hats, but the 80 hours a week part is just not where I'm at my most effective. Whereas if I'm working with a sponsor or KP, then I can make a really disproportionate difference. But Janice, as far as the people who are out in the audience, who are you best suited to help?
Gosh, I don't know if I have a great answer for that. And I say that because I'm still getting my feet wet in real estate. I have just a couple of years of experience. So I don't even know how to answer that.
Sure, yeah. So maybe it's more operators, maybe it's more deal sponsors, maybe it's more financiers, contractors.
Probably contractors and financiers would be my best bet because I know lots of operators. I know lots of investors. I'm meeting more sponsors. So I know lots of players in the game. It's probably the other folks that I can make some introductions for.
All right, I love it. And so people must be thinking, how do I reach out? I'm going to sandbag that and talk about myself for a little bit. LinkedIn is definitely the best way to reach me. It's where I spend most of my social media time interacting with other people in the real estate space and other investors and all that kind of fun stuff. And of course, I did mention dandoesdeals.com, which is where the pushing 400 episodes or whatever it's at the time that you're watching this, that's all in a playlist there on dandoesdeals.com. It's a great way to reach out. And if you want to appear either on this podcast or on chesswithinvestors.com, where we talk about our investments over a live game of chess, that's a great way to connect. And through LinkedIn, we can book this interview. The QR code that you see on your screen, that goes to my Amazon author page. It has a few different books, including Real Estate is a Scam, where I'm talking about the things that coaches often tell people where it's kind of leading towards disaster, and you have to be a little bit careful that you stay on the right side of the law and you're more effective in running your business. So that's as far as how to reach out to me. Janice, if people want to reach out to you, what are the best ways?
So definitely LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn, just about it. Well, almost every day. Very, very seldom am I not. Or they can email me, Janice@greenrootcapital.com. Those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me. Love to connect with anybody. And if I can help anybody in any way, always available to hop on a call.
I love it. I love it. And on that positive note, it's time for my public service announcement. It's not so much for you, Janice, as for you in the audience. If you've been watching this episode and experiencing searing pains in your eyeballs, maybe like migraine-like symptoms, I'm confident it's because of the downright hideous subscribe button. That's right there. You can get rid of it for free. You just click on it. And full disclosure, the reason why I'm so eager to get people to click on it, it's so that those deadbeats at YouTube actually start to pay for these videos instead of me. I think that would be absolutely amazing. And as I said, it costs you nothing. All it really boils down to is that my videos might show up on your list of suggestions. Quite frankly, you can go ahead and ignore those suggestions because I just really appreciate the fact you spent this time with me. Just like Janice, I appreciate you joining me. This has been great.
Thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it. It's been awesome.
My pleasure. Awesome. Hey there. Are you interested in commercial real estate deals? Would you like to build your network of investors and deal sponsors? Well, the best thing I can do for you is have you appear on a chance encounter interview as featured on dandoesdeals.com. You may know me from 506B Me or as a top commercial real estate voice on LinkedIn. And if I had to think of the top factors in your success in commercial real estate, my top two would be your network and your ability to effectively explain how deals work with effective communication. The 15-minute chance encounter format, it checks both of those boxes, and they ensure that you can share your private deals with me without the SEC calling it a public solicitation. So hop onto LinkedIn. You can see my name is over here, Dan Friedenberg, and search for my name. And the best way to reach me and book that is to message me through LinkedIn. And don't worry, it doesn't matter if you decided to enter this space just last week or 2 weeks ago, or if it was decades ago. It'll be fun and easy to look good. We're just asking multiple choice questions based on your core competencies you look to contribute, your level of sophistication, and all that kind of stuff. So I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.